Great. Well, thank you all for joining us for today's Friday lunchtime session. I hope you've had a good week and looking forward to the weekend. We today are going to be talking about the Ordnance Survey's Mastermap product, a product that the Land App has had hidden away in the background for a number of years. We have been using it as a backcloth, but today we're going to demonstrate how you can access Ordnance Survey Mastermap Vector, and I'll explain a bit more about that later in the session, but to really derive insight for both you and your clients' workflows. Just before we get started and introducing our guests, as usual, housekeeping for our Zoom sessions. Your cameras and your audio are switched off and you can't switch them on until the Q&A, and we've worked out actually we can invite people to speak as and when we need to. But as Tom's mentioned in the chat, any questions for either the Land App team or for Gus, who's from Ordnance Survey, please do pop those in the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. We will be staying around at the end for Q&A, so please feel free to stay, or if you need to shoot off, you are welcome to do so. Just if you do leave, there are a couple of questions that will pop up on your screen as per that just feedback both to us and to Ordnance Survey around future development and what other webinars you might want to see. Finally, the session will be recorded and as usual, it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. If you're new to the Land App lunchtime sessions, I would recommend going to look at our YouTube channel. Tom's been beavering away in the background, making those look all nice and pretty, chopping them up so you can dive through, we've had sustainable farm incentive, countryside stewardship applications, estate planning. There's some really good ones on there. So really, we've got an hour today. We should be able to get through most of this within probably 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I've done the housekeeping, which is great. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to our panelist, Gus Smith from Ordnance Survey, who's the technical relationship consultant. And then once Gus has finished his presentation, we're going to be looking at how the Land App now can serve Ordnance Survey Mastermap, bit of a step-by-step demonstration, the use cases, which we're not going to cover them all, but hopefully we'll cover the generic ones that you'll all need if you are going to engage with Mastermap. Once we finish that demo, if there's time, you may have seen a bit of a stir on social media this morning, and we've just released a bit of a workflow around wild edges, which is how farmland and estates can really promote environmental recovery through a cheeky algorithm that we've written. Then at the end, the last 10 minutes, as per usual, we'll be going through the Q&A that's been coming through. So any questions, whether that's about Land App use cases or anything in terms of licensing, potentially, hopefully Gus will be able to answer any questions that come through. So without further ado, just wanted to really introduce our guest speaker, Gus Smith, who is the technical relationship consultant at Ordnance Survey. He's here to talk to you about Mastermap. Just from our perspective, the reason we're really trying to put Mastermap in is because it is the authoritative data set for the UK in terms of topography, location of infrastructure, and the regularity of this data being updated is so critical in this moving climate. So Gus, I'm just going to pop your slides on the screen and over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I basically, Dan has covered absolutely everything I wanted to talk about on this particular slide. So at the risk of repeating myself, I think we'll just move on to the next one. Cool. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Toppo, so Mastermap Topography Layer is, I guess the best way of describing it is the truest representation or digital representation of the real world, and potentially probably the most detailed that's available in the market at the moment. It is designed on a kind of not necessarily one-to-one scale, but it's definitely designed to incorporate as much detail into those kind of digital representations as possible, and it has all kinds of attributes which help it to really become quite a great kind of qualitative and analytical resource. There are about more or less 500 million features currently in Toppo. That number is ever increasing as we strive to gain kind of that greater level of detail, and they're more or less kind of measured in the quality of the detail. So for instance, in urban areas, you have up to 50 centimeter kind of shift, but that tends to be at the absolute maximum. So it's really quite accurate, and yeah, it's a very beneficial product. Next. a bit on how that's captured. So we have three methods of capture. The first is probably the most iconic, which is the man with the stick with the weird little flying saucer on the top. And those are field surveyors. So effectively they go to sites, so building sites or to parks or bridges or whatever, and they capture the position of each of the individual vertexes for that particular feature, and then they update those directly into our National Geographic database. The other means of capture is the aerial photography. So that tends to be more about attribution, but we also do include kind of things like category C or maybe even category B, things like housing extensions and things like that, things which don't necessarily change how you interact with the world around you, but are still fairly important to have. And the third kind of source of information that goes into our data is that kind of third-party thing. Now, generally speaking, that used to be very fixated on things like the National Street Gazetteer and stuff like that to drive our change intelligence and say, okay, we need to send a survey over to here. So they've got a large housing development. And that's kind of starting to change a little bit. We're starting to incorporate more and more sources of information which we have ratified as authoritative, just to give us that broader scope and that broader basis of information which we can then share with our customers. Cool. And so this is a kind of a styled version of Toppo. As you can see, there's a huge amount of information on there, and it's worth noting. So historically, the way that we have designed our products is to kind of fit that need within the market. So a lot of you will be familiar with kind of like the paper maps that you go rambling with. And that is very true of kind of former iterations of these kinds of products. So Toppo in itself was an iteration beyond the initial. So initially it was kind of giving you that backdrop, that contextualization. Toppo, the aspirations behind that was to give you a data set which you could then add your own information, add in your qualitative information, add in ability to analyze and to assess kind of the information in that and give you a much more tactile kind of experience with it. But that is not where the journey ends. So currently we're undergoing a different transformation, and we'll go into that in a bit later. Cool. So talking about kind of adding into that kind of data set, the first, and I think the first kind of forays into that journey was when we started enhancing on top of that Mastermap data set. So the image you have in front of you is kind of that building height. So the need behind the building heights was that kind of that 3D, that 2.5D kind of aspiration to give you an idea of being able to do a town sitting planning, being able to do heat and sound analysis, all those kinds of things. It gives you that extra qualitative information. And there are a couple of more examples. So for the next one, you've got functional sites, for instance. So these, we have captured and registered sites of specific interest, like schools, like hospitals, like power stations, like libraries, things like that. And we've gone, people are interested in where these places are, how we get to them. So we've also included things like access points and routing points and things like that, so people can better kind of interact with that data set. And it's the same with this next one. So this is green spaces, and this is looking at green spaces. I believe it's in London. It is awesome. It's always good to guess completely correctly, but you can see it's constantly trying. We've been constantly trying to drive the extra value and the extra ability to analyze your data and to add in extra things which can help you get insight into what's around you, what's going on. And this is an example. So the use case that we've got up on the screen, so this was done for Searchland, and they are predominantly interested in identifying private gardens, which are quite extensive, which have an opportunity to develop. So they wanted to look at potentially developing new properties on that land which is accessible. So the use case in this particular instance, so they used our APIs and the UPRNs to kind of identify where they could go, and then they ratified that using Toppo. So it's not necessarily an either or thing. All our products are very much designed to be interoperable in order to kind of get that value out of there. So you can use all kinds of things in order to get the answer that you're looking for. Finally, as alluded before, so when I talked about the aspirations of Toppo being that kind of that grid, that box, which you could then put your information in, the next iteration, and some of you would have heard of this term before, and some of you, this will be a completely new term, is the NGD. And the NGD is the National Geographic Database. And if we go to the next one, awesome, cool. And the National Geographic Database is designed to basically take that next step. So as I alluded to before, we've always been trying to iterate and develop towards that need of our customers, and this next one is almost entirely focused on kind of that qualitative, that an analytical need. We're looking at kind of structuring our data so it makes more sense. We're looking at, rather than taking a productized view, we're looking at trying to divide that into forms and formats which are more beneficial to our customers. So there's a little less hoops for you to jump through so that you can really just jump in and get that information in. And the example we've got here is kind of that land parcel theme. So you've got like this, if you think of it as a kind of a folder structure, you've got your land, which is the main folder, and in that you've got like the collections, so the things which might be of interest for you if you're trying to do a certain task. And then you have several collections underneath that theme, and then you'll have in that I don't want to call them products, but the kind of various data sets which would then fulfill the purpose of that collection. And I think it's just going to be a really, I think, particularly if you use it in an analytical style, this is going to be a really great kind of development for the future. But don't worry, you're still able to do kind of the contextualization and things like that. It's not an either or kind of scenario. It's just about kind of enhancing that use case. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Awesome. Is there any questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Gus. What we'll do is we'll hold off on questions until after the demo. Really appreciate that. It's clear there's so much detail happening in the background, and we're really keen to enable people to get hold of that, use it for their own benefits, but also it's great to see some of the other use cases. I was at a conference last week where I saw a demo of some of that noise modeling. So they're modeling cities and towns about noise pollution and using Mastermap as kind of the way of augmenting where sound could be stopped. So yeah, some really exciting use cases. And if anyone's got any questions for Gus, whether that's about the technical side, about the data collection and how regular it's updated, for example, and upkeep, or if there's any questions asked about use cases, please do pop them in the Q&A function.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gus. So for the next